Bar for bar album reviews, clipping, Visions of Bodies Being Burned. Visions of Bodies Being Burned is the latest project from the rap group Clipping, and the group is comprised of rapper/actor Daveed Diggs and producers William Hutson and Johnathan Snipes. This album was originally recorded alongside their last project, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, that released last October, and it can kind of be thought of as a continuation of sorts. What had really happened is that this album was originally going to be released a few months after There Existed an Addiction to Blood, but the pandemic happened and here we are. But seeing as it released in October again, I think is very appropriate because spooky times. This project comes in at a total runtime of 52 minutes with 16 tracks, so it's definitely a longer listen, but I think it's totally worth it for the horror themes here. Another thing to make note of is that clipping definitely isn't for everyone, especially with this project. Their sound leans pretty heavily on the industrial and noise rap sound that they've kind of been using and has been present throughout their discography, but it also includes more horror themes than previously, at least in my opinion. The album starts off with an intro, which has a fairly heavy 808 and spooky feeling to it, which eventually leads to a scream. Then Daveed starts rapping with the first line saying, "Pick it up right where it left off," which in my mind is really just signifying that this is a continuation from their previous project. Daveed's verse is hella quick too, but I don't think that's meant to be the main and sole focus here. I think his verse, accompanied with the instrumental and spooky feels, is really, as a whole package, what you're supposed to be thinking of here, and it works great. The second track on this project is Say the Name, which was also the first single. The track itself retells the story of the Candyman, who had an interracial relationship and a child with a white woman, and is then lynched by her father. Without knowing about the Candyman, the first lines are pretty dope because it sounds like he's referenced to the hook, is talking about the hook of the song, but it's really the Candyman because he got a hook. The chorus in the song could definitely also be used as a pro-Black/Black Lives Matter sort of track too, since the origin of the Candyman is so based in racist actions. Even the bit after one of the last choruses can be seen that way because he's asking if you can say the name again. This is cool because on one hand, it's the way to summon the Candyman because you gotta say his name 5 times, but it's also in a way to remember the lives of those lost to other racist acts. Then we get an interlude titled Witchboard, which is really just a skit where there's a couple of girls playing with a Ouija board. The spirit gets them to spell out that he is here, which then goes directly into the next track, 9-6 Nev Campbell. And this track starts off with a knocking, supposedly from that spirit who is now here. This track also features Cam and China, 2 female MCs that I haven't heard of up until now, and they're hella dope. The track is supposedly about the final girl who has survived a slasher film, so that's dope. That makes the chorus where they're saying "this bitch boss" make a lot more sense. It feels like it's kind of meant to be an empowering sort of track, because if it's following the last survivor who happens to be a woman, it's like, yo, she dope as fuck. We're taking through all the badass things that she's done and had to do as the last person alive. Seeing as they refer to her as someone that seemed unassuming at first, it just makes everything cooler to me. Something Underneath is up next, and this track seems to be referencing zombies. The zombie aspect of it comes from the intro with "Raise Up Out the Dirt," as well as the first verse where Daveed says, "breaking the face of the planet." Both of those lines make it feel like something's coming up out of the ground, and given the theme we've seen thus far, zombies don't seem like too much of a stretch. I like it a lot because this track just keeps building up until the first chorus, and then the beat breaks down to just like a triangle for a bit. I also enjoy it because it's one of those songs that Daveed just raps without pausing, continuously gets faster and faster until the chorus. So that's always fun to hear. Make Them Dead is one of the first tracks that many people would probably get turned off to, and that's only due to the song having a fairly harsh instrumental, which in my mind gets easier to listen to by the time the chorus comes on. But it manages to maintain its original sound though. This track feels almost like a cult meeting of sorts, with the first and last verses. It's almost as if the leader is preaching to them about what's going on outside of the cult and is using that as proof that they're in the right. The chorus also adds to that feeling quite a bit. Beyond that though, it could really just be talking about gun violence and likely about cops killing people with the lines, "wag too much and them love they guns, God them say savior, so make fun. When them end comes out of the thing they fund. The only reason I brought up cops is because of the fund line, because aside from that, it really could just be about gun violence in general. Next we have She Bad, which starts off with the sound of a rusty gate swinging in the wind. And this song is about a witch living in the woods that calls out to the main character in the first verse. Given the horror movie themes, this is more than likely meant to be about the Blair Witch, or one of the follow-up movies to the Blair Witch Project. Evidence for this really lies in the last verse with the line, maybe someone find the tape, but also because there's a whole group that went out to the forest and came upon a house with this gate from the movie. The play on words in the first verse with the lines, Papa drank the gut black, you smoked the backwoods, now the woods call you back, which then gets continue on with back to the mouse, back to the snake, back to the root, back to the day, back to the fire, back to the way the wood burned, back when they told you she couldn't stay. It's just a fun way to continue on the idea of going back. David also does a great job of creating an image in your head about the settings as well, from the forest to the unstable bridge to the cabin, and just everything is said in a way that describes the surroundings really well. We then get another interlude, this time titled Invocation. There's just an instrumental here and nothing else. And the instrumental is really just a sound. So an invocation is the summoning of a deity or something supernatural. And given the context of the album, it's more than likely the second one. On top of that, apparently the tone that's being played is an E5 that's 17.6 cents sharp with a frequency of 666 hertz, which just adds to the idea of an invocation or a summoning of a demon, the devil, spooky stuff. This interlude then leads into Pain Every Day. And this track uses samples from EVP recordings, which are supposedly the voices of restless spirits. This addition adds to the idea that this track is about spirits who were killed violently and have not been able to pass on due to the circumstances of their death. In this particular case, the spirits were victims of lynching and are haunting the white descendants of their murderers. The reason and evidence for this is in the first verse where David mentions the floating above, which is referring to when someone is being hung. They don't die immediately. They just stay there, suffering until they die from asphyxiation. The reason that spirits are likely haunting the white descendants rather than just everyone in general is because of the cross line. This makes it sound like these spirits were hung by racists or the KKK. David is rapping again from an omniscient narrator perspective here, and in the chorus he lists off the things that the spirits should do, including making the haunted scream, run, suffer, and eventually die. The haunting shouldn't be limited to only when they're conscious though. He's saying carry on these activities even when they're asleep by chasing the dreamer, which is what he suggests in the second verse. Then in the third, he goes kind of the ring route and suggests that they get out through whatever media they're consuming. So whether that be TV, their phones, whatever. The title of the track could be talking about the spirits experiencing the pain that they suffered every day, and they're just continuously suffering it, or the pain that they're going to bring to the haunted every day. Check the Lock is an interesting shift because it follows a drug dealer as he slowly loses his mind due to paranoia. This track is interesting because it doesn't quite follow the same horror themes as some of the previous tracks, where their threat was more supernatural. This time, the threat itself is his own paranoia, but also actual people coming after him. The dealer tries to rid himself of his anxieties with pills and alcohol, which really probably isn't going to be the best option at this point. And then the chorus has him checking the lock every time he walks by the door. However, I feel like the anxiousness that's built up in this track makes it feel like he's checking the lock way more often than that. He's doing a lot of things that make sense for someone to do when they're worried about someone coming after them, such as keeping your head on a swivel, checking your rear view, parking your car down the street so no one knows where you live, and obviously checking the locks. The paranoia gets so bad that he's sleeping in his chucks just in case someone comes in, so he can get up and run or be ready. Next up we have Looking Like Meat, which features Eddie and the OGM of horror. They're also noise rap pioneers, so it's not surprising to have them featured. And this song is, unsurprisingly, about people looking like meat, and has everyone on here talking about it. It's interesting to note that the chorus as well as David's verse makes it seem more like someone's getting pressed on affiliations. And this is a little bit more evident in the chorus, but in the verse, David says, "Crypt keeper, crypt walking where the feet are lit. Blood drinker, blood talking when you see the blick. Brazy on the blame, crack the skull, go on, eat the shit." It's almost like he's created the story of a gang member who's turned cannibal. I mean, that story would be fun to see, maybe. This then goes into the final interlude, Drove. And it's super unclear of what this is supposed to mean because it just sounds like they went to a field at night and recorded crickets and sheep noises. I don't know. The album begins to wrap up with the track Eaten Alive. And this track is named after the film of the same name in which the killer runs a motel and feeds some of the patrons to his crocodile, only to eventually fall victim to his own methods. With this information, the song makes a lot of sense. I mean, like, why would you walk into the swamp with the gators on when there's already alligators or crocodiles? They'd probably be pissed off about that. David then also questions from the swamp inhabitant's perspective, when did the swamp turn into a real estate? Which makes sense and could be applied to a lot of areas in which humans are expanding into. The swamp is home to many, and expanding out there is limiting their homes, so they're fighting back. I also felt like the beat included kitchen noises, which would have added to the Eaten Alive bit, but I don't know of any crocodiles that can cook, unfortunately. Bodies for the Pile actually came out back in 2016 on Adult Swim's Noise compilation. This track takes us through the death of 3 different police officers in detail. Each of the 3 verses takes us through each of their deaths. The first one was due to him being beat to death in his own home. The beatdown isn't really the main focus here, but the imagery of the aftermath is, with the dried blood on the off-white carpet and the rats and other animals coming in to eat the body. The second verse is about a cop who gets shot in the head in his office. David paints a picture where the officer's office is highly decorated with commendations, but alongside all of that is the officer slumped over in his chair with brain matter and blood all over. Finally, in the third verse, we hear the final death. This officer dies via a car crash during a chase, and he hits a hydrant and the flow from the water is strong enough to just burst through the windshield and just cuts him up. The penultimate song of the album is Enlacing and acts as a solid way to wrap up the album. It sounds like the song has a few people involved, potentially at a party, and they seem intoxicated in some manner, but everything that happens feels Lovecraftian. This influence starts with the first verse where we get the lines, "Wait, how you looking at your own face when your face is on your face?" Which really could just be a high thought, but it could also just be that they're seeing their own face outside their body, almost as if someone has recreated it to disguise themselves. The party aspect of the song appears with "fuck, this song slapped" though, as they're seeing these faces. Almost as if they're like, fuck it. This song's dope though. It could also very well just be an out-of-body experience. I mean, who knows? The chorus seems to be the host telling everyone to kind of subdue themselves and realize that they're not special because there's just so much more that they're not aware of. And, I mean, all this could very well just be in their heads, because in the second verse, they're taking pills. But then finally in the third verse, the Lovecraft ideas really show themselves, because the heart of it, or the fundamental principles of Lovecraft, is that in the grand scheme of things, humanity ain't nothing, and it's essentially meaningless. Like, there are things way bigger than that. Like, there are other beings out there that are more important. The album ends with the track Secret Piece, which is a rendition of Yoko Ono's piece of the same name. This is nothing out of the ordinary for a clipping project, but it's cool that apparently most of the artists that were involved here have contributed to the ascending piece. Overall, this album was pretty damn good. I know that this type of music isn't for everybody, and I don't blame you if you don't like the project. The noise/industrial rap song isn't really something that's easy to get into, but I feel that it almost forces you to figure out what the songs are about and why they chose that particular instrumental even more. For me, I feel like most of the instrumentals here were chosen because they wanted to really hone in on the horror theming that we heard throughout the project, especially with the influences and direct references to horror films. My favorite tracks here are Say the Name, 9-6 Nev Campbell, Something Underneath, Check the Lock, Eaten Alive, and Body for the Pile. It was actually really hard to limit my favorite songs here because every track is incredibly interesting in their own ways. If you're a fan of clipping or horror-themed music, you'll love this project. But like I said, it's not for everybody. If you're at all interested in clipping, but unsure of if you'd enjoy the noise wrap sound, I would actually recommend There Existed an Addiction to Blood. That project carries on a lot of the same themes as this one, but I feel it's a little bit more approachable sonically. And then you can go from there and check out everything else if you want. Anyways, that's all I got for this review. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this album, what your favorite tracks are, and where it ranks in Clipping's discography, really. Also, like and subscribe if you want to see more reviews like this one. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.